This is the Sales Babble Podcast, episode 479, How to Allow a Buying Decision Without Forcing.
Welcome to Sales Babble, the podcast that shares selling secrets for non-sellers. And now your host, Pat Helmers.
Hello, Sales Babblers. This is Pat Helmers. And when it comes to the enterprise sale, I liken the seller to being a ringmaster at a circus. They choreograph multiple acts happening all at once with dogs and ponies over there and aerial acrobats up there. The same is true with enterprise sales. There's lots of moving parts, and oftentimes the buyers have competing and conflicting interests. So it begs the question, what's a seller to do to bring order out of all this disorder? The Tao teaches Wu Wei, actionless action. You're not to force a decision on anyone. But what's the best way to get a team to make a decision? That's the topic for today. But before we do that, make sure and subscribe to the podcast on whatever podcast app that you're listening to. And I don't know if you knew this, but we're also available on Spotify and YouTube. And we have been for quite some time. There's lots of places where you can find the Sales Babble Podcast. Do all you can to make sure you never miss another episode. And so, with no further ado, let's get to it. And now today's chapter, The Wise Decision Maker. The buyer values tradition. Fearful of flash in the pans, they prefer the serious, the powerful, and the so-called safe. Yet the market is a series of spontaneous changes. To resist only creates sorrow. It's the wise decision maker who knows they don't know. The master seller speaks of the risk of avoiding risk, and how when the spring comes, the grass grows itself. And now today's story. Chris was managing a large business-to-business deal, and it was getting out of hand. There were many members on the team and just as many factions. No one could agree on what they wanted, much less agree on buying Chris's offering. Unsure what to do, Chris knocked on Pat's door. Chris started, "Remember the lead deal I talked about last month? The one with the humongous buying team? Well, they're stuck, and I can't make any headway. Where am I screwing this up?" Pat laughed. "Yes, I remember that deal. If I recall, they're risk intolerant and prefer the status quo, which is always your biggest competitor. Doesn't Lee have the final say?" "Supposedly yes," said Chris, "but I'm not certain." Pat paused and then said, "Smart organizations are good with change if it happens in an orderly manner. What they hate is having change shoved on them. Some people will fight to the end on stopping change." Then Pat went on, "Lee is your best choice. Meet with them separately and talk frankly about risk. Show how it's risky assuming the current circumstances won't change. They will. Like the seasons, the markets are always in flux. This is especially true in Lee's industry. To not decide is to decide." Lao Tse wrote, "In pursuit of knowledge, every day something is added. In the practice of the Tao, every day something is dropped." As sellers, it's easy to get excited about a new product or service. We forget that most people have years invested in the tried and true. You can't force change. No. It's only with kindness and patience can we create space for buyers to drop past beliefs and arrive at frictionless action. It's when the old disappears, space is made for the new. To get a copy of today's chapter, you can find links to it in the show notes at www.salesbabble.com. And while you're at the website, if you have a question about this episode or any other episode, don't hesitate to reach out. I just got a question the other day about sales. I'm always quick to respond. Now, if you found value in this podcast, make sure and share it with one other person who is looking to grow their selling skills. That's one of the best things you can do to help grow this podcast. With that said, that's all I've got for today. Until next Tuesday, take care and have a highly successful and a profitable selling day.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Babble podcast. Find us at www.salesbabble.com.
This is a production of Habanero Media.